It's about time because we're going there.
Welcome back to We're Going There. I am your podcast host. Thanks for sticking around these here parts. I feel humbled, I feel honored, I feel privileged to be able to pop into your ears and your hearts to share topics that might feel a little uncomfortable for people. What are the things that need to change in our thinking, or what are the things that need to change in our life that give us a fresh perspective on growing emotionally, physically, and spiritually? I am very excited because this season I am not going to be doing the episodes alone, which is the topic that we are going to discuss. I'm so honored and excited because I get to welcome Lauren Bronson Petrous to the show, who's not only a friend, who has not only been an anchor in this season of my life. You are more than someone that I love hanging out with. You are more than a pretty face. You are actually incredibly talented, you are educated, you are smart. You're also, there's a fighter in you that makes me very excited about this season because I think your lens, your filter, your perspective as a consultant in change management, also your passion for developing people and developing leaders and helping organizations remain healthy is going to be so advantageous to our listeners. So Lauren, you are such a dear friend, and I'm inviting you to speak honestly, openly, in this episode and other episodes this season as my co-host. So thank you for being here.
Oh my gosh, Bianca, thank you for having me. It is such a joy and an honor. And when you, I remember when you said, Lauren, I have a big question for you. Would you be on a co-host on this upcoming season? And I was just like, absolutely. What an honor to do what we do and talk about all the things that we want to talk about, and we just get to share it with our friends and listeners. So it's
because
great.
We text each other
Nonstop,
every day.
day.
There's voice memos, there's calls.
It's like heavy stuff. We'll be like crying. We'll be doing prayer over each other, and then we'll be talking about like what makeup we need. It's all the things.
It's all the
what
things.
Leadership challenges we're facing. All the things.
And I think in the last 8 years that we've known each other,
has it been 8 years?
It's been 8 years, Lauren. It has been
No.
8. Yes, and we met overseas. Where did we meet?
In Greece.
Lauren?
Okay.
We met in Greece.
Footsteps of Paul.
Yes.
Yes, in Greece.
Yes.
And oh my gosh. And there was just like this beautiful blonde who I liked her boots. I think that was my first comment to you. I was like, I like your boots. Which is
I want to
such a us
emphasize that
comment.
you said boots on that
Boots.
because it kind of sounded a little bit like
Stop.
lady parts.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, everything's nice. It's fine.
So I hosted a Footsteps of Paul cruise, and we went on this adventure of going through the book of Ephesians.
Well, your boyfriend.
My Bible boyfriend.
Yeah.
My Bible boyfriend,
Yep.
Paul the Apostle. It was like a dream trip that I got to plan. And we didn't know each other prior to
No
this.
clue.
But
No.
you were there,
Yes.
and we connected. 8 years later,
Here we are.
which started as a tour that I got to lead, now has been an adventure that we get to do together. So,
Think of all the highs.
and
like
all the lows. We have been through it.
Been through it. We've gone there in every possible way with each other. So then just like me coming onto this podcast called We're Going There, just it works.
It fits.
It works.
It fits. Now, here's the thing. You are a consultant by trade.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the episodes that we're going to do this season, it's going to be us having dialogue. And some episodes, it's going to be you interviewing me.
Mm-hmm.
And then other episodes where I interview guests, we are then going to take listeners' questions. We're going to think through and actually pick apart some of these main key topics that we have.
Us picking apart topics.
Can you believe it?
This is like our
Basically,
favorite things.
It's free consulting with a professional who's consulted for top 500 organizations around the world. I can't name drop.
Yes,
but
we're
I'm
classy.
going to say you're fancy. And you have consulted for amazing organizations, nonprofit organizations, Christian organizations, secular organizations. And so your perspective is not just because you think it. You have been adequately trained to really pick apart and analyze things that are healthy and unhealthy. I don't say that because you are trained in this. I say that because you have walked in a very hard season with me. And for the last 2 years, you have been privy to a lot of my private life.
Yeah.
And you have walked me through one of the things that we love talking about, and it's this idea of what does the power of living alone or solo adventures or aloneness bring to an individual?
Totally.
So this season, I really want to talk about the power of alone.
So good.
That being alone doesn't mean lonely.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that we've really kind of bonded on is right when we first met, we were talking about how independent we are and how other people thought it was weird that we like doing things alone.
I remember actually we were sitting on the bus in Greece and we were just starting to get to know each other, and we were talking about, you were asking me something like, oh, so you're traveling, and I'm like, yeah, I just traveled by myself for a work trip, and you're like, oh, how is that for you? I'm like, it's fine, it's good. I get to read, I get to go to restaurants by myself, and you looked at me with a double take and you're like, I like to do that. And we just both looked at each other. We're so used to being the rare person in the room.
Yes.
And we both loved it. Yeah.
And people, okay, so I'm not going to speak for your experiences. You can, this is, we're going to volley our experiences back because there's going to be two types of listeners. There's the listeners that are going to look at with excitement and say, wow, me too. And then there's going to be listeners like, wow, I could never do that. And what I want to do is really take time and discuss how culture equates being alone as something negative.
Yeah.
And being surrounded with people is like the ideal way to live.
Yeah.
Now, both of us say community is wildly important.
Right.
Both of us are
both.
saying we don't want to live like hermits in isolation. We're not advocating aloneness as the way. But I think that we've over-indexed on doing life with a partner or with a group of people, that we've lost the beauty of discovering aloneness. So we have science, we have data, we have some statistics, but where I want to start, I'm going to throw you kind of for a loop. Let me be a pastor for a second. Let's actually talk about what we see in the Bible for aloneness. So I know that when we've discussed this, the concept of alone feels less than. Most of the time it's because in church, we have idolized marriage and coupleship. So together is good, single is bad. Why is that? Well, it starts in the book of Genesis, where God says it's not good for man to be alone. And though I am not disagreeing with that.
Yeah.
I love community. I love friends. I love relationship. I love co-laboring.
You love people. Like anyone who knows
people.
you for 2 seconds knows that you love people. Yes.
And also, I'm a twin. I was literally born in community. I love the idea of doing life together. It's wildly important for me. However, when we think about discovering who we are as individuals, I think that only happens when we are alone. And so I think in scripture, you've also highlighted things that you've seen about aloneness. Where do you see aloneness in its most powerful form, like in scripture?
Yeah, I go back to Jesus all the time, because Jesus spent so much time with the masses, teaching, working so hard. Then he has his 12, mentoring, discipling, doing life with them. Then he has his 3, he has his inner circle, he has his close friends. But Jesus spent intentional time alone. He made sure to walk alone, reflect, process, pray, unwind, go to his Father, look for wisdom. And I just think that that's something that our culture has lost. I feel like we have two extremes happening in our culture. One, we have people anesthetizing. So they don't want to feel, they want to numb. So they numb out, they don't want to be by themselves. We put on Netflix in the background and we just chill out. I mean, I'm so guilty of it. It's a way I unwind, but it is a form of anesthetizing ourselves. It's a way of numbing ourselves when I'm overwhelmed, when maybe I feel like I screwed up in a meeting, or maybe I had an uncomfortable conversation with my husband or a friend. It's just a way to numb out. I'm not being with myself, I'm numbing out. The opposite extreme is where we go to addiction, where we have to always be going 10 miles an hour, 100 miles per hour. We have to be constantly working. We go to workaholic mode. And so that's kind of like this fast-paced addiction mode. And so I feel like we find ourselves in two very separate camps. And I don't see Jesus doing either. Like, he was so balanced in, I need alone time to self-reflect, to process, to be. And I think that aloneness fosters clarity, it fosters self-discovery, and it fosters growth. And in those things, are my good pastor? I got 3. Pastors love the answers in 3s. So alone time, to me, it fosters growth, self-discovery, which will foster self-awareness, and that brings clarity. And I just think in a time where there's so much confusion, there's so much overwhelm. I literally could go on Instagram and I have one influencer telling me one thing and the opposite thing being told from another. It can just be very overwhelming, and we need to not be afraid to be alone.
I love that if you take a look at the scope of scripture with characters like Daniel, characters like Elisha, characters like Hagar, it was when they were alone that God revealed himself to them. Moses, alone. Like, there's a lot of people that did alone moments, and it was there where they met the presence of God. And so thank you for letting me just kind of have like a Bible breakdown for a second.
We love Bible breakdowns.
But we also love science, because I'm going to back this up. So we're going to be sharing a little bit of like personal details. Psychology Today explains that stepping outside of our comfort zone can actually build resilience and increase our ability to navigate life independently. Now, I had to give that statistic because, like I previously mentioned, I'm a twin. I always grew up with somebody. So decision making was always with somebody. And I've been in a season where I've led with somebody, or I served somebody.
Yeah.
Now I'm in a season where I am forced to make decisions autonomously. And in doing that, I'm discovering so much about me. And I know that not everyone who listens to the podcast is a Christian, but what I have discovered is that I've learned so much about God in this season of isolation and leading and living solo. So this has been a huge mind shift for me that I'm excited about, and everything that I learned and that I've been able to process with you, with God, with counseling, with therapy, is something that I cannot wait to share with other people. I'm excited for this season.
I can't wait.
Any other learnings that you would see, like scientifically, that like benefits of aloneness or benefits of solo ideating?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much data behind the importance and significance of solitude. So that I think oftentimes we equate aloneness with loneliness, and we're all afraid of being lonely. You know, it's something none of us want to feel. But like, do you have to feel lonely when you're alone? And my argument and data back saying no. There's a source from the World Economic Forum, and they talk about how solitude actually creates greater confidence. It helps people think more clearly and more creatively. And so I think that these are just things that are lost on us sometimes, that we, again, in our fear of feeling lonely, we don't take the time to be alone. And therefore, those are aspects of ourselves that we lose.
Okay, so let's start there, because somebody listening is probably thinking, I could never go to a restaurant by myself. I could never go to a movie by myself. And so
give it to me.
Okay,
I love those things.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you, we've had conversations before. I love going to a movie by myself. I mean, well, actually, let me give a caveat. I love going to the movies with somebody, but if somebody doesn't want to go with me, I have no problem enjoying a movie alone.
So you'll go to the movie theater by yourself,
yes,
and get your little popcorn,
yes.
and
is it embarrassing to walk to a seat by myself? A little, because then everyone knows, like, oh, or can assume, oh, poor thing, she has no friends, she's here alone. Or I can just be like, I actually enjoy being by myself and enjoying.
And that's what I think the mind shift is, though, is that I think in culture, we immediately don't want to also be alone in public, for example. It's one thing to go alone on a hike where there's no one looking, but it's another thing to go alone in a restaurant or to the movie theater, because you're instantly thinking exactly what you just said.
Yes.
People are looking at me away because I'm lonely. And that's the exact mind shift, is that it's real. It's very normal to feel that way. But at the same time, the fact that you're still doing it means that, like, I want to enjoy my own company and do something I want to do, and I'm worth doing that. Not just because I don't have someone, but because that's something I want to do. I'm worth that.
So is there a hump? Is there kind of like a moment of insecurity, like when you make a reservation for one? Because both you and I we've discussed this. We've discussed making a reservation,
all the
like
time.
going onto Open Table or Resi and just picking one person.
They're going to flag me because I also have like 17 Resi accounts, because I literally
Wait, do you really?
No, I do. Because they will lock you out, because you know me. I like to make multiple. I'm going to give you guys a secret. So Lauren, is Resi going to get in trouble? Probably. They're going to block me. But I make multiple reservations at different places. Then based on my mood level, I will choose which one I want to go to.
Oh, I'm that hilarious.
I'm that person, but go ahead.
Okay. So you make a reservation for one, and you go up to the host, and the host or the hostess looks at you, and you give them their name, and you tell them one. What is the reaction that you get?
Okay, so they usually double blink at me, and they like pause to make sure. I think it's like maybe out of compassion. So I think they're just like, is she okay? Like, I look at them, like, they narrow in on me, like, is she okay? Is she emotional? Does something happen? And then I just get like a pause, and then I get usually like a, okay, follow me. So it's almost every time, male or female.
Is the word pity? Do you get pity?
I feel like it's a concern, like, is she okay? And then it's kind of almost, sometimes I get like this, it's almost like a slight like disappointment, or like, I wonder why. I think that's it. In culture, we start to wonder, why is she alone? Because why would she be alone? I think that's what culture gives us sometimes. And especially as women, I think that we are often the ones that carry the burden of, like, if we're not in community, and if we're not with a husband, or if we're not with our kids, then we are somehow less valuable, or something must be wrong. And I just think that's something that we have to be intentional about shifting.
So I am going to share some personal information in this podcast, and I'm glad that I don't have to do it alone, even though we're talking about this aloneness. But you and I have had conversations about the power of being alone, and certain self-discovery doesn't happen. You told me this. Certain self-discovery doesn't happen unless we are alone. And I know that I have sat at restaurant tables with a book or my iPhone or a notebook, a journal, and I have been alone. And God has met me in those alone places. So we can speak about what the Bible says about aloneness. We can give science, but what have you discovered in this journey of discovering the power of solo, discovering the power of alone? What are some added benefits for someone that's like, well, this feels so foreign, I've never done this before?
So a little bit background on myself. So I was raised by a single mom, and she was just so savage. She like had no support and just did what she needed to do to go from job to job, which meant that oftentimes my sister and I had to be brought in and out of schools, which meant that I was perpetually the new girl. So I was constantly forced to be by myself in new environments with no friends all the time. So I think from a young age, I had to learn to not necessarily enjoy being the new one or the new girl or the one alone, but I certainly had to get used to it and not let that fear of aloneness drive me, or else, Bianca, I would have never made friends.
Yeah.
I would have gone to dark places. And so it was something that I think from a young age, I had to not let it control. I was like, I am going to be alone, but that doesn't mean I'm not one of them. It doesn't mean I'm somehow the lowest on the totem pole at the school because I'm alone. And so I think there has to be this shift of like, I am valuable. And even in moments where I'm not picked at the lunch table, you know, when I'm a kid, or even as a woman now, and it's like, and I'm looking over and there's a group of friends at a restaurant and they're all sitting there together laughing, and I'm traveling for work and I sit down alone and they're like, oh, it's just you. And they take away the dish, you know, the plate and the glass on the other end of you. So it's just like the lone silverware at the table for yourself. And I have to sit there, and instead of me immediately going to my phone to try and hide, which I think women do a lot. Specifically, I think women do a lot. If they are in places of aloneness, they'll grab their phone and they just try and hide and camouflage their aloneness.
And I've done that.
That's real. There's moments for that. But I think there's something very empowering to put the phone away and grab a book if it helps decompresses you, or to just sit and enjoy a glass of wine, or to enjoy the amazing meal that you're having and being like, I am enough in this moment. And then for me, as a believer, I want to ask, like, Lord, will you be my date tonight? If I do feel lonely, or if I do feel insecure about something, inviting the Lord in, because he is our companionship, but also just sitting and being like, what am I thinking about what happened today? And what do I need? What do I feel? I think those are really powerful things that, again, we either anesthetize ourselves so we don't ask, or too busy getting our hits in work mode that we don't just sit and be.
I think it's important for the listeners to know that you are actually married, and you've been married for 9 years?
It'll be 9 years.
9 years, yeah.
That's
so you've been married for 9 years. So you're saying this as a married woman.
Totally.
And putting an emphasis on self-discovery alone.
Yeah.
So we previously discussed this a number of times, but when we are alone, we discover who we are.
Yeah.
And so many times we try discovering who we are in the presence of somebody else.
Totally.
But what we're not aware of is that we're taking on their traits, their desires, their likes, their dislikes.
Comparing too.
Comparison too. I'm not even just talking about in a marital relationship.
No.
Even in friendships.
Exactly.
Or in business partnerships. We start taking on the identity of other people. If we don't know who we are, we will take the identity of other people. I've worked with people who have latched onto me and tried to take my identity. And I've been in relationships where I've taken on their identity. Now, I think in relationships, there's a power of, you know, discovering things that you like that you previously didn't like because someone exposed you to it. I'm not saying that if you like something that you didn't previously like, then you've lost your identity. I'm saying that if you don't know who you are or the things that you like, you won't know who you are. And so I think that discovering who you are really happens when you are alone.
Absolutely. And, you know, one of the key for me as a change management consultant, I've worked with Fortune 500 executives. I've worked with key church leaders and board members and international nonprofits. And one of the biggest things that I'm always looking for that's a key differentiator between high performing leaders and low performing leaders, and it's self-awareness. But the thing is only 10% of the population is actually self-aware.
Wait.
1 in 10 people are actually self-aware. Guess how many people, when this is a real thing, like Gallup, Harvard Business Review, you can look this up.
Okay.
Guess how many people think, if you were put on a scale of like 1 to 100%, what percentage of the population do you think that they are self-aware?
Oh, 90.
Yes. Like, it's like literally 85 to 90% of people believe they are self-aware, when in fact only 10% of the population is.
Wow.
And so that is significant. And it kind of just goes to show exactly to your point that we have to first, I think, the root is you are valuable as you are, and you are valuable enough to enjoy your own company. And I think that, to be honest, a lot of us don't like ourselves, so we avoid our own company. A lot of us are fearful of what other people think of us when we're alone, and so those are reasons why we don't do it. But if you're willing to sit alone with yourself, and you're willing to ask the hard questions, you're willing to do the hard work of looking in the mirror. Bianca, looking in the mirror is scary. You can see things that are beautiful, you can see things that are broken, you can see things you don't like about yourself. And I think the most beautifully human and powerful thing someone can do is say, I can look in the mirror and I can own the broken, I can own the weaknesses, and I can own my strengths, and I'd still look in the mirror and choose her again. And when you can get to that mindset of like, I would still choose her, there's opportunity to then examine and identify, here's areas where I need to foster growth. Okay, this is an area I suck at. This is an area I want to improve in. It's not the end of the world. Let's name it. Let's own it. Let's process it. Let's reflect on it. And then let's figure out how to get better. That is so powerful. But in order to do that, we need to sit alone.
So in listening to you, just you speak right now, and then also being your friend over the last 2 years specifically, you really help people get unstuck. But I don't think that happens without a high level of self-awareness. And I'm going to keep on saying this. I'm not sure that we can discover who we are while looking at other people to be our mirrors. Like, I really think it's between, like, if you're a person of faith, it's between us and our maker. If you're not a person of faith, it's between you and, well, you. 'Cause if you don't serve a God, then you become your God. But I do believe that the truest sense of self-awareness happens when we're alone. But there are some things that only come up, or there's things that stop us from wanting to be alone. I know that between my story and your story, we have reasons why alone feels scary. So I'm going to just make this known right now in this particular episode. This was supposed to be one episode. I'm just making the decision right now that I do think that there needs to be a separate part 2. Okay. So surprise.
Shocker.
I know. I feel emotion coming. Okay. Yeah. And I want to get through like the tactical and the practical of alone, because in part 2 of this episode, which will come out tomorrow, I'm going to be talking about being in a forced season of alone. And you've walked that journey with me, but I think it's really important that we do some groundwork before we talk about like my lived experience in this. Yeah. So
I can't look you in the eye because you're making me emotional, but yes. Okay.
It's been a season.
It has.
And you've been part of that season. And I love the podcast community so very much. And I want to bring them in on this new year and this new journey and a new season of my life. But I think the reason why I always was terrified of being alone was, like I've mentioned 3 times, I was born in community. I had a twin. I also was born into a very large family. And then we also had a robust church community. So I was always around people. But there were a few times in my life where I was alone. And in those moments of being alone, bad things happened. And so what I unconsciously made a covenant with myself and my conscience was, when I'm alone, bad things happen. And it was something that I didn't realize that I had made until like adulthood. But there was sexual abuse as a child. And then there was inappropriate touch as a several different moments of inappropriate, uninvited, unexpected touch as a 20-year-old. And all of those things happened without the presence of my twin sister Jasmine or like a significant other to protect me. So in my mind, I believe 2 things. When I am alone, bad things happen, and I am unable to take care of myself. And I held on to that for a really, really, really long time. And I think that's why I was panicked to do anything alone. At the end of the day, I didn't know that I could trust me or that I could protect me. And I think that there's a lot of people that have different reasons for why they don't like being alone. Your journey, what were some of the things that you've discovered or made you afraid or not wanted to be alone?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because my background, sexually abused as a teenager, sexually abused again in my 20s. And so my thought process is actually, if I'm just by myself, I'll be safe. But if you bring in a variable of someone else, they can hurt me. So I almost have this opposite extreme. And you and I as friends have talked about this, Bianca, how you're almost like, okay, I would, having, Jasmine, since you were a young kid and you've walked with a twin your whole life, and how if I'm with someone, then I can be protected. For me, I almost became the opposite extreme, where I had to be like, I want to be alone. I only want to be alone, because if anyone else, even one person, they could hurt me. And so I almost went to the opposite extreme of aloneness, which is not healthy, because we are called to community and we are called to trust. And it's something that I've had to work through in like my marriage. Like my husband's been so wonderful just trying to understand, what are the parts where I really want him and I need him to be a protector, but at the same parts, my journey is I've been taught everything else is not safe outside of me. So I think I come at it from a different perspective, but I think in aloneness, the fear of other people's judgment, especially from other women, I know mine has been more like I get judged for being alone. And that's something I feel like I had to overcome. It's like you may not have to get it, and you may look at me a certain way, and that's something I think you have to just surrender, because again, at the end of the day, if I'm alone, if I'm at a restaurant by myself, if I'm traveling by myself, if I'm reflecting, or one thing that's really important to me that's been integral to my spiritual, emotional, and mental health is taking like 4-day retreats where I will literally go and book myself. I have a favorite place. It's in Laguna Beach, and I go there and I spend 4 days, and it's just me by myself in an Airbnb and Jesus. And those are just, it's once a year, and I just reflect and I pray.
Yes.
And that's what I need. But getting over, I think, the societal feedback, the cultural norms, the stigmas I get is part of more of my fear.
In this season, I'm also recognizing, which let me just affirm your 4-day getaways, because I'm so here for that. You know, I do my 4 days. Where do I do my 4 days?
You love the desert.
Yes, I go to
Jesus
Palm
meets
Springs.
you in the desert.
Yes.
I go to the beach.
Yes.
Boom.
Now, don't get me wrong. I love me
We'll
a
take
beach.
both, actually. Because
Okay?
I'll take Palm Springs, because that's where you go.
Okay, so one of the things that I've realized in this season of aloneness and solo living and leading is that because, especially within a church background, we view partnership as like the ideal and partnership as good. If you are alone, it's equivalent to not being chosen. And so I want to remove the misnomer for a lot of people who are in a forced season of aloneness or are choosing aloneness. Aloneness, we got to think of a better word. Is it solo? Aloneness feels like negative.
Let's actually make a pause on this bit real quick,
Okay.
because I think it's important for us, again, to distinguish that we're not saying, like, do everything alone
No.
and being the lone wolf is the way to go. What
No.
we're saying is, you have a lot of friends, I have a lot of friends. You have a large church community, I have a large church community. Like, colleagues and being a part of the body, that's biblical. Being part of the body of Christ, like being in community, that's all biblical. It's emotionally healthy. Data also backs that up. However, what we're advocating for is for intentional times of aloneness, fosters that self-discovery, which brings awareness, which brings growth. And at the same time, there's also moments where it's like, ideally, I don't want to be alone, but life happens. For example, you travel a lot, I travel a lot. There's times where we don't necessarily want to sit alone at dinner at a restaurant or be on a plane by yourself next to strangers, but we do. And so that's a forced aloneness. That's not necessarily super hard, but it's something we have to get used to. And so I just think that instead of us trembling or us not following through in our destiny or careers because we're afraid of being alone, we're not letting that stop us. And the third thing I'm hearing you say is that then there's times in life where what you thought would never happen happens, and you do find yourself alone, or you get fired and you're now alone, or your friendship ends and now you're alone. And that stuff, all three of those things that we talked about, is aloneness in different ways.
So I think this is a great place for a pause. And I want to let our listeners know this is a 2-part podcast, because I think we need to spend a little bit more time setting some groundwork. I'm in a new season of life, and it is not an aloneness by choice. It is an aloneness because of my marriage ending. And so I want to not hide this. I haven't been hiding this, but in this next episode, I want to give people like an update on my life. And in this season of solo living and leading, I'm inviting people into the process, not for anything salacious, but to document what I have lived through, what I am learning, and what I really want to share about meeting God right here in this moment of transition and solo-ness.
Yeah, it's so good. And I think even when God birthed that idea of like we're going there in that podcast, like you've been someone that's always had the humility and the courage to go there with your friends and to go there with your listeners. And I just think it's such a testament to who you are. So thank you.
Okay, friends, we are pausing this episode and continuing on for part 2. Joining us tomorrow as we continue this conversation.